Welcome to Still Serving, the VFW podcast, the official podcast of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And now, from the VFW Memorial Building in Washington, D.C., here's your host, Rob Couture.
And welcome to Still Serving. I'm your host, Rob Couture, Director of Public Affairs and Strategic Outreach, right here in the VFW's Washington, D.C. office in our nation's capital. And we're going to go ahead and start the business of the VFW, starting the meeting right now. Joining me in the studio, let's just do roll call. Next to me is our, well, introduce yourself. Just go ahead and introduce yourself.
No problem. Kristina, Keenan, Deputy Legislative Director of the National Legislative Service in the Washington office.
Yes. And thank you for being, this is your first time being on the podcast.
It is.
I don't think I've ever had you in my entire time of doing the podcast. I've never had the one and only Kristina Keenan, top lobbyist for the last 3 years in a row here in DC for nonprofits. Not to toot your own horn. You weren't. I was too
excited. I'm so happy to be here.
All right. And so going over to right next to her is the fan favorite, I'm saying it right now, fan favorite, Joe Grassi. Joe, what do you do?
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Brittany, for the invitation. I am the Associate Director in the National Legislative Service, and my focus is on grassroots advocacy, and I work out of right here in Washington, D.C. at the Washington, D.C. office.
Yes, and that also includes Action Corps, which we can get into a little bit later, but that is the online service. If you are online service, that's not even it's basically a subscription, I would say.
Digital newsletter.
Thank you. Digital newsletter. Yeah. Right. Digital newsletter on behalf of all things legislative that we do here in the Washington, D.C. office. And of course, joining us, my co-host, Brittany Dymond Murray. Brittany, hello again. How are you feeling?
I am doing well, Rob.
You feeling well?
I'm doing well.
The weather's treating you good?
Yes. Did some shoveling the other day.
Man.
But fully recovered. It all worked out.
Ooh, I tell you, the shoveling was crazy. So for those that don't know, we got about, I would say 9 inches where I live. But you guys got about 8? About the same? So yeah, I live out there on one of the fingers, if you will, going in, they call it the necks, going out into the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland. And so it's a little bit of a commute for me to come in, but I tell you what, growing up in New England and having snow plows all over the place, Maryland is not that. They were not ready. So saying to you, Brittany, like earlier today, it's basically just an ice rink from my house all the way out to the main road, just simply because we didn't have any plows. What about you?
You know what? We were really fortunate. For some reason, we had a plow truck on our road all the time, starting in the early morning hours. But some of the other streets in our neighborhood were not so lucky. They're still covered with ice. Like there's like no plowing done, it seems like, at all. So a little bit strange disparities between the streets in the neighborhood, but getting in today wasn't bad.
Wasn't too bad.
No.
And then we find out that they're making all these preparations for the inauguration.
Yeah.
Right. Fences are going up.
Yeah.
People are told, get out of here. So anyway, a little admin note, if you will. We're recording this today, and hopefully we'll be able to come back in a couple more weeks and record another one, but we'll see. Weird things happens around here in DC around inauguration time, and so that's what's going on in our neck of the woods, if you will. Not to steal somebody's catchphrase, but okay. So let's start off with Brittany. I'm going to go to you. So let's roll call. Let's go down the list of things we got going on.
Let me bring out my sweet whiteboard, per usual. So today we're going to start off with unfinished business, which is the Dole Act. We had a pretty huge update on the Dole Act, so Kristina's going to touch on that a little bit. In the new business, both Kristina and Joe just returned from SVA's NatCon in Colorado, which is their annual national convention where SVA students from all around the country descend on this convention, and they will get into what that looked like this year.
All right.
And then we're just going to close things out like usual with good of the order. So anything that comes up that we want to discuss a little bit more before we close out the show today.
Yeah, great. And thank you for that, Brittany. And this show is brought to you by the VFW, which is our organization.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know.
No sponsors.
Yeah, right. If you guys want to be out there and sponsor the podcast, hit me up. You know where to find me. But let's go into something, some unfinished business. Before we go into unfinished business, and we start going down into the list of things that we want to do here, Kristina, who was a post commander at one particular point in time in her life.
Post 605.
Yeah, there you go.
Paris, France.
Woo, woo. Or wee wee. So she brought this to my attention from our ritual of manual, and it is some of the things that she thinks that we should do here in the podcast. Now, of course, we're not going to be able, we have a quorum with the four of us and you out there that might be a VFW member watching. I guess if it's just me, and I have at least 4 other people that are watching, we probably have a quorum. But anyway, so we did the roll call of the people that are here, and like, for instance, next, she's like, well, we could talk about membership. Big deal with the VFW. When we get to NatCon, we're going to roll that in. Everybody all in favor?
Yeah.
Say aye. Yeah.
Aye.
All right, good. So we'll roll that down in there. Quartermaster's report. Well, I don't know. Well, maybe one day when we get the quartermaster general in here, that'll be kind of nice, right? So we could talk about how
Service
officer report. How, but you know, the service officer report that can tie into also NatCon because
Absolutely.
Joe, you said that we had a booth there or a part of the table that was doing claims, I guess, right?
Well, Cindy Noel, assistant director for MVS, she was running services, consultation, and filing services at NatCon on the exhibit floor, and there were several thousand people there. And she also had a teammate there, and she was working shoulder to shoulder with VA executives and VA staff, and they processed hundreds of claims in 2 days. And of course, giving great advice and direction on how to navigate that whole process.
And that's a huge value. You know, we've done that at our national conventions. We did a claims clinic. We've had it for at least the last 3 years since we came back from COVID, from COVID restrictions, I should say. And then the last 2 years, we had the VA there on hand, like basically processing the claims. And it was
doing exams,
rating exams, went on site, And so they, from what I understand, they processed and filed over 360 claims in 2 days, and probably gave advice and consultation to several hundred others.
Right there at the convention.
Right, and I think that it's important to point out that those who did bring their medical records on a disk or a thumb drive or paper, ink and paper, and if you did bring your records, you had a very good chance of filing and submitting your claim right there. Perhaps even getting a decision a few hours, possibly the next day. But I know that they were able to finish over 360 claims in 2 days. And then, like I said, and they advised several hundred others. So it was a tremendous success. And anytime that we have the VA claims reps at a conference or convention, it seems to be a very successful program.
That's, I tell you what, like that is such a win for veterans that are out there to be able to have that right there where they are. Like, I tell you what, when I was in the military, I was a hands-on kind of guy. I don't know about you all. I know Brittany, she's the smart one between the two of us. And we were talking yesterday, like how, because she was doing some of this like online training that we're required to do. And she did it so quickly. I was like, oh man, you must have been a whiz at the annual terrorism.
Anti-terrorism force protection training.
Right.
Cyber awareness.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, it was just, it was just easy. It was like, common sense to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's one of those things. It's not like I couldn't get through it, but when it comes to training, when it comes to interaction, I'm more of a hands-on kind of person. I think a lot of veterans are that way, right? Yeah. Like those of us that joined the military, and maybe made an attempt at college, or maybe we did go through college, one thing we found to be beneficial is like, all right, here we are right now. Let's learn, let's train. Okay, moving on, putting into practice. Okay. And so when you have a claims clinic that's right there at a convention floor, you're there, no matter where you go, there you are kind of a thing. You're right there at the convention floor. You're being able to process the claim. Let's do this. All right, I'm here. I'm doing it now. Done. Fantastic. So for those of you out there that are thinking, should I go to NatCon next year? Well, I guess if by invite, or if you're someone that is, thinking about SVA, that's definitely something you should think about. But we're going to get to that in a little bit more about the conference. But that's part of, as you said, a good opportunity to talk about our service officer report.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, we're
So
knocking it out. This is a great.
We're just knocking it out. It's already a good meeting, right? Okay, moving on. I need my little, gavel. Let's see. So let's just move on to unfinished business, since we have many committee reports, right, that we need to go through. So unfinished business, the Dole Act. So for those that this is do we know the official title? We do. It's Senator Elizabeth Dole.
Yep. 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act. I had to write it out because it is long.
It's long. Is there an acronym with it?
It's just the Dole Act is kind of how it's commonly.
That's how we've been calling it. It's the Dole Act. Well, it finally passed. Then it was they held on to it there for a little bit at the White House, and then President Biden finally signed that into law.
Yep.
Not much, I'm going to be honest, not much fanfare. He didn't give us quite any kind of a heads up.
No.
Like, that would have been nice.
Sometimes there's a ceremony. Sometimes, as in this case, there are a lot of bills to be signed, short amount of time. And they just, get signed on the day of the hour.
That's right. He's got things. He's got all kinds of stuff coming across his desk right now.
So.
I got to get this done. Medals of honor, presidential medals of freedom. Sign pardons. I got to get them all done. Right. So commuting sentences. What else I got to do? All right. Let's get this done.
It got signed into law, and that's it. That's what counts.
That's the most important thing. Now, what that means to veterans. Because there's a lot of things that were stacked in there, a lot of provisions.
It was really comprehensive.
Really comprehensive, right, Brittany? When you and I were talking about this as we were helping guide the statement that Al put out, it was like, okay, so is it a provision? Are these things? Well, what's one of the big things that comes from it is there were bills within this bill.
Yes.
Am I right?
Similar to other large package like legislation, like the National Defense Authorization Act every year. So there are bills introduced all year, same thing for veterans bills, and they often get scooped up and put into much larger packages, which Kristina will expand on. One of VFW's own championed pieces of legislation was included in a Dole Act.
Yeah, that's right. So this was originally last year's end of year package or Veterans Day package, and that's really common actually. Each year we work with the Veterans Affairs committees from the House and the Senate to put together usually non-controversial pieces of legislation into a package and pass it around Veterans Day or towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
That is, we're always trying to pass lots of legislation, lots of bills, having, participating in hearings and being part of the process. We have our priorities, but generally there's a package of bills that tends to pass each Congress or even each year. And this was sort of that bill. The original Dole Act as a standalone was a bill to improve the caregiver program.
Right.
So those who officially take care of veterans in their homes and some of the support that they need to do those services or provide those services.
So let's just kind of go over that real quick, because I think some people may not know that we have veterans that are elderly, they're infirmed. Is that right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. Infirmed. That need assistance. And a lot of times they either have a caretaker in the homes, and most of the time those caretakers are coming from family members, right?
Often family members.
And so these people are, let's just put it out there and remind everyone that when it comes to veterans legislation, this is when you continue to send us off to war, right? And we raise our hand to defend our nation.
That's right.
And proud to do so and glad to do so, that we are able to stand in the gap and in defense of our fellow citizens. But when we come home, there's a price to pay that comes from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times we suffer the wounds, both seen and unseen, of war, and we give up a lot. And so as we get older, these health problems and different things, or if they're already there from our time serving, they compound as you get it. So you need somebody to help out. So family members are giving up their their jobs. They're giving up their time.
Yep.
They're, giving up where they live to move in with their veteran who they're
There's a
supporting.
financial strain often. There are resources that are needed. Not every veteran with disabilities, can afford nursing home care, and not all the veteran nursing homes can have all the veterans that that are aging, that are part of the aging population. So it does make sense to have additional resources for caregivers, and veterans and caregivers have been asking for this.
Right.
And we've worked with the Dole Foundation on legislation like this. We've heard from our members, from their constituents, that this is something that people have been asking for.
Right.
Is to make the caregiver program a little bit more smooth, and to really support veterans that have disabilities that need care in the home.
And I don't think there's anything controversial with that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that any veteran legislation that we put, controversy, you know what I mean? I mean, I get it. There's people out there like, well, I don't know, alternative medicines. That might be one of the things that brushes upon controversy.
Right.
But the majority of these things that we're asking for, they're needed. We have to have them.
Yeah, and VFW advocated for this bill along with like 30 other organizations of caregivers, survivors, veteran groups. So there was a huge community of advocates that were behind this, and behind them, all of their members and supporters. So, maybe not since the PACT Act have I seen like so many organizations want to have a bill passed.
Right.
And the Dole Act, and then all of the components of this package had incredible support from the veteran, caregiver, family, survivor community.
As a matter of fact, Brittany, we had a press conference right in our own lobby.
Yes,
right?
we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
And who was there?
Goodness. I mean, Kristina mentioned that there are numerous organizations behind this effort. To Kristina's point, it was akin to the PACT Act, so showing from the PACT Act. So PVA, DAV, Legion, Elizabeth Dole Foundation.
To include Senator Dole.
To include Senator Dole herself. She was here.
That's right.
So it was an impressive turnout, and the urgency and passion to get the bill passed was quite palpable.
It was, I would definitely say it was a great coalition, if you will, to bring this forward. And, it wasn't, I mean, this bill was not as big as the PACT Act. There was a lot of controversy, again, I say that, but really across the street, or, down the street, so to speak, with the House of Representatives, some people that were on the fence and supporting some people that wouldn't because they were playing to their base. So, there's a lot of things when you come to really big bills, but this wasn't as big. It was just many bills stacked in there.
Right. And a lot of groups with specific interests in getting that legislation passed. To Kristina's point, caregiver stuff. So, there are many organizations that we work with every day whose interests are very specific, like Paralyzed Veterans of America. Their constituents, if you will, they have very specialized medical needs. The veterans that they serve have very specialized.
They're looking at catastrophic injuries and specialized care at VA. Regardless of, I think, the population that each of these organizations represented, there was a lot of common ground. Because there were expansions and provisions on VA healthcare, community care. There were also provisions that would help survivors. We're always trying to, every year, if we can, sort of move the ball forward, even in small ways. And so there were a lot of things that were added to this bill that many of these groups had been asking for a long time. And so, a lot of groups, including the VFW, had many victories that came out of that.
Right. One of the victories and Brittany, you talked about it earlier, and we say get to it, and here's the part to talk about.
Yeah, not just
which is right, not just another number. I always throw in an extra door. Not just a number act, which is great.
Very important piece of legislation.
It's a bill that we had been pushing for a while.
Yes. For a couple, maybe 2-3 years, it had been one of the VFW's top legislative priorities. When we flew in our members for our legislative conferences, they were promoting the Not Just a Number Act. The reason why this is important is the VA puts out an annual suicide prevention report, and it has primarily been a lot of health data, mental health data, but we know that suicide prevention and factors that relate to suicide can be economic factors. They can be, whether you have housing or food insecurity. There are many different factors, whether you have access to the healthcare, not just if you're using it, but have you had access to it? Did you have a disability claim that was denied or that's still pending or still in appeals? All of these things can be contributing factors. And so this bill was really focused on the data for VA to report more of their benefits usage data in their annual suicide prevention report so that Congress and the public, have an idea of what's working at VA, where they need more resources. And because we generally know that veterans who use VA healthcare have lower risks for suicide. But what about all the other benefits? How are they contributing to preventing suicide? And so that's not just a number act.
That's right.
think that's... go ahead, Britt.
Suicide is not strictly a healthcare related phenomenon. So people are complex, and so we need to, in order to get to the root causes of what's unfortunately contributing to veteran suicide, we have to have all of the understand
employment,
all of the factors.
Employment is a big issue,
yes.
And the Department of Labor reported at NatCon that even the fear of losing your job can be a suicide risk. So even just that. So employment is huge too. So we just really want to look at all the data points, and VA has a wealth of data that could be reported and it could be useful for Congress and the public.
Well, I look, I mean, when you're someone who has a family and, you're looking at losing your job, especially those who are in the military, when transitioning in the military, like I knew that if I was killed when I was in Afghanistan, there's almost $500,000 that's going to go to my family.
Yeah, your SGLI.
Right. And my soldier group life insurance, right? That's the acronym that we want to.
Oh, sorry, that's right.
Yeah, we'll try and make sure we talk about that. But that was one thing. It was like, oh, I knew I'd take care of myself. But man, when I transitioned out of the military, that was a huge concern for me. Now, yes, there's veterans group life insurance that you can apply for if you want to, and then transition over. And but there's some veterans that are like, you know what, maybe it's just better that I'm not around, because then my family can collect on the money for me. That it shouldn't be. No, look, I think every one of us, we need to be at the point of it, be able to step in for our comrades, right? For our brothers and sisters in arms at that point of crisis. We should be paying attention to check in on them and do that. I mean, we talked about that during the holidays. It's important to do that, especially for those who are transitioning. I've lost friends since they transitioned out of the military, to the demons that they had and to whatever else. And that it makes me like, man, I wish that, I don't know if I could have stopped them from the inevitable or what could have been the inevitable, but it's important for us to be able to step in at that moment.
Absolutely.
But with this legislation, it's about getting to the left of the point of them getting to that crisis.
Getting ahead of the problem, understanding better the needs of veterans of today, and that data can give us a better picture. VFW also, I would just add, is a big proponent of veterans getting their benefits as they are transitioning. So as they're getting out, so whether it's a pre-discharge disability claim or enrolling in VA healthcare, so that connection is maintained as they're getting out. So there isn't this question of where am I going to get my medical care, or I have an injury and how am I going to take care of that, and do I have any income, and that kind of thing. So we're a big proponent of that.
And that can be especially important for people who are not retiring from the military, right? So they have a guaranteed retirement check coming in. They have access to TRICARE. They're not losing health care by leaving the military. That's not the case for most people who exit, the services. So having some sort of known, having a disability claim in, if they qualify, if they have any injuries or illnesses from service, that could be make the transition a little bit easier and a little bit more predictable.
A protective factor.
Yeah, it's a protective factor.
Yep.
A couple of things I'd like to mention about not just the number act is that another important thing that the act does is that it breaks down the silos between VBA and VAC. And when I learned that these agencies do not share their suicide research, to me, that was beyond belief. I couldn't believe it. It's counterintuitive. Doesn't make any sense. But that's the environment in which they were working and have always worked, especially in terms of the subject, which I could not believe. And so another thing that this legislation does, this now law does, is that VA compels VBA and VHA to share their suicide research, which is just common sense. But at least now it's the normal course of business, starting just recently, compared to the previous situation, which makes no sense. The other thing, and I think Kristina's probably going to get to this pretty quickly, is that we charged our VFW SVA legislative fellows last year with advocating across the board for the Not Just the Number Act. And they had a great amount of success, and their effort was instrumental in making this happen.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so great about this. Okay, we're gonna. I think it's good. We'll wrap up the Dole Act, but it's important because that transitions into SVA NatCon, right? Because we know we've shared this partnership with the Student Veterans of America for
over a decade.
Yeah, I think it's like 14 years. Yeah, I think that's where we've been, and having these fellows that come in, they're VFW members. It's a fellowship they are able to work on, and we have some right now that for every single year and work on specific legislation. And they were working on that last year, which is really great. And
Fantastic.
to have members that were on staff. I think of Tammy Barlett, and I think of
she was a fellow.
Catherine Castle, right? Yeah, they're awesome, and they were also fellows as well as VFW members too. So the bill, so that's it, and VA is going to be putting this into action now this coming year. Is there anything else you want to touch on the bill that maybe people didn't know that's important?
No, I mean, I think we hit the main points. I mean, oversight will be sort of our next job in the coming years to make sure that it's fully implemented, and we'll just keep doing what we do and hope to keep passing packages like this every year.
Right.
That's sort of our goal, in addition to the big bills that we advocate for.
How do you now? That's kind of interesting. So I want people to understand how the VFW Washington office, now we advocate for legislation, it gets passed, hopefully,
ideally.
Right? Ideally.
Yeah.
It gets passed, and then it becomes law. And to your point, you said oversight. So the VFW just doesn't advocate and it's like fire and forget, move on, right? We just don't go and do that. There's a lot of follow-up. There's a lot of surveys. There's a lot of that stuff, interaction. We do kind of pitch the ball, so to speak, to NVS because they are our National Veteran Service folks with our service officers. They are the touch point, our accredited VA accredited service representatives, claims representatives. They're the touch point with these veterans, so they get to hear a lot more. They're able to collect a lot more of that data from them.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a really important relationship we have with them. Yeah, because so our National Legislative Service advocates for the legislation, often based on National Veteran Service feedback and their experience and what they're seeing on the ground, so to speak. And so it's a really highly complementary relationship.
It kind of goes back to them. Once the bill, once the legislation passes, they're still interacting with VA on a regular basis and with veterans on a regular basis. So they can say, what's happening in reality. Are these programs being implemented? And there's usually a bit of a grace period for VA to implement some of these things, and they've got to look at regulation and get this as part of sort of their standard operating procedures. So there's a little bit of a gap after the bill passes when they're sort of ramping up to implement, and then our National Veteran Service interacts with VA and with veterans to hear how is it going.
Right.
And then they tell us and we report back to Congress.
Right.
So when Congress has oversight hearings, we can say what's going on the ground. Yeah.
Right.
Is it being implemented?
We get a lot of those questions. How is it being implemented?
Right.
So
and if people want to be informed on that, to plug in what Joe does, is they need to subscribe to Action Cord. So talk about Action Cord a little bit while we're here.
Well, right now,
As run senior editor.
Thank you. I'm more of a managing editor,
Yeah.
which means I compile news items from my teammates, and that we could get more into the editorial process if you want. But I'm running a special for all of your podcast listeners and viewers.
Okay. A special today.
Yes.
Today.
And this special is available to everyone, period.
Okay.
And the special is subscribe to VFW Action Core Weekly. And you can do that by texting VFW to 50457. That's right. For you today, you can subscribe. You could be an Action Core Weekly subscriber, get the inside track. Okay, the inside track on legislative news and all of the legislative actions that the VFW is taking on Capitol Hill. You can do that right now today. Text VFW to 50457, and you won't be sorry that you did. Also, at no extra charge, because everything is free in any case, in terms of Action Core Weekly.
Yeah, right.
You are also going to take part in our action alerts, which gets everybody to have a shoulder to shoulder and a unified voice to support legislation that is beneficial to veterans and military families. And of course, the name of the game is protecting veterans' benefits and compensation, and military family benefits and compensation, and also expanding benefits and compensation for veterans and military families. And, Rob, I'd just like to mention that in terms of benefits and compensation, you mentioned the word controversy a number of times. And there are a number of words that are always connected to controversy. And one of those words is money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would like to share my perspective, and I think I could speak for everyone. Our perspective is that we understand about fiscal responsibility, and we understand that money needs to be conserved and saved. Understand that. But we're telling the United States government, do not save money at the expense of veterans. It's wrong for a number of reasons.
It is.
It's wrong because it's the wrong thing to do.
Right.
And it's wrong because when those of us or those who need medical care and compensation and benefits said, I'm going to remember my country and the good that it stands for, and I'm going to volunteer, and I'm going to dutifully conduct my duties, then the United States government needs to be there for them when they need the compensation and the benefits and the health care and the care that they need. That's firstly. That's because it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Secondly, why is the next generation going to man or fulfill an all-volunteer force if they see that the veterans that they've watched grown old in a situation where they were not taken care of by the U.S. government? So the thing is, there are many reasons. I probably could name 10, but those are two important reasons. And so in any case, if you, going back to Action Core Weekly, if you want to get the inside the beltway, the inside scoop, the inside track on the actions that VFW is taking to protect and expand veterans' benefits, subscribe to Action Core Weekly. You could go to VFW.org, look it up, Action Core Weekly, and you can subscribe. Or you could subscribe through the text VFW to 50457, and you won't be sorry that you did, because it's really chock full of important information. And also, when we start talking about National Veterans Service, NVS, they're in constant contact with the VA and monitoring the efficiency of programs and the effectiveness, and so on and so forth. And it's a constant process of refinement. But their findings are also included in the Action Core Weekly. So you get the legislative angle weekly, and it comes out 51 weeks a year. You get the legislative angle, and then you also get the Veterans Affairs benefits angle. So subscribe and participate in the action alerts.
That was awesome.
It was.
I knew there's a reason I brought you on the show. Man, I say crowd favorite, fan favorite. I'm a favorite.
Thank
That was awesome. Great. And you know what? We even have like a little snippet there. We could probably make a little commercial. Talking Ed. I think that works, Brittany. What do you think?
I think so too. And coming from Joe, like Joe before he joined our team, he was a service officer himself.
Yeah,
right.
So he's highly, well versed in all things veteran benefits.
Yeah,
and how critical they are to maintain and continue improving over time.
I'm pretty good.
I'm pretty good.
Present. I would just like to, do my due diligence to give due credit. Before I got to the VFW, I represented claims on Vavana Avenue, and then for the that was 2 years, and then 2 years with the VFW at Walter Reed.
Yeah.
And that was benefits delivery discharge for active duty. That was pre-discharge claims. And so thank you, Brittany. I know a little bit about it, but we have experts here who are running. We have experts here who run National Veteran Service. And so I many times I go to them.
Yeah.
It's for expertise. But I thank you for the compliment. But the range of expertise here runs deep, and I'm always impressed. For example, like I mentioned before, Cindy Noel, assistant director, running the claims clinic at in Colorado Springs for NatCon 2025. I in fact, even during the conference, I would go to Cindy and say, Cindy, I have these questions. And she was able to square everybody away.
Next time she's in town, I would love to get her on the podcast.
Oh, absolutely.
She's a tremendous wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
agreed. So good. So now we move on to new business, right?
Business. Let's
and
talk about
we I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about NatCon, but there's one thing from it. We kind of said we were going to push forward. I saw this picture. Oh man.
Oh yes.
Yes. I saw. Okay. So for those in the VFW, the reputation of one of our past national commanders, Tim Borland. I've seen him in action in airports. I've seen him in the weirdest places be able to recruit someone into the VFW.
He's unstoppable. Really.
He is unstoppable. At first it was like, oh man, you're going to do that right here. And then he goes and does it. He's so good at it that they made him a national recruiter.
Right.
And so for those that were there, now tell us a little bit about the table. Well, I'm kind of ginning up this photo right now. Tell us a little bit about the table that you guys had, if you wouldn't mind, Joe.
Well, we had a terrific exhibit space right in the center of the exhibit hall at the Broadmoor. I would call it a convention center. They don't call it a convention center, but it is in every way a convention center. And it's a very impressive facility and a very impressive space. And it's beautiful surroundings, as you can imagine, in Colorado Springs.
Oh.
And we had an exhibit booth right next to the center attraction, Student Veterans of America, and they're set up right there. And I have to say, and I'm very happy to say and proud to say, that the amount of people, the amount of student veterans and veterans who visited the VFW booth were
it was mobbed.
It was
it was mobbed.
Call it what it was.
It was mobbed with people. It was a table.
We had a great crowd.
Past National Commander, VFW National Commander Tim Borland and Judy King had come, and there was so much excitement around our booth.
There was so much excitement around a VFW booth.
Yes.
This is awesome.
I thought maybe that those weird garrison caps, the funny caps that the VFW wears, might be driving people away, but apparently not.
Apparently not. They must have recruited 200 people.
They
had a stack of paper, like membership forms.
They recruited over 200 people in 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Now,
It's a lot.
keep in mind, like we have moved into the 21st century. There is a QR code. You can use that.
I don't know if it was quicker because they just laid them out and people came up and were, signing.
joining?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was beautiful.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think it was mobbed?
Well,
What we've been doing as of late?
I mean, we did. So I had the privilege of
That's right.
giving sort of the welcome speech. at NatCon, and
Kind of a big deal.
it was
Kind of a big deal, right?
yeah, it was the first day, the first few hours of this national conference, and so a room full of maybe 2,000, 3,000 student veterans. And so I gave the VFW welcome. I was wearing my hat, and I sort of said, I might not look like a typical VFW member, but I wear the hat.
Yeah.
I got the ribbons, and I'm here to try to change what people think about VFW members. And
great.
And it resonated. It really did. And I think people were just excited. Like, I can join the VFW. If I'm eligible, I can join the VFW too. And a lot of folks came up to me afterwards and at the booth and said, "Thank you for saying that. And where do I sign up?"
Well, I tell you,
Fantastic job.
when we were looking at something you had said, one thing that Brittany had told, because Brittany, you had said it was her lived experience, but it's also and it resonated with you.
Absolutely.
And it was, it was, I remember your words were, "I wear this hat and these ribbons, and some people still don't think I'm a veteran."
Yeah. Right. Yeah. They want to know if it was your husband or your father who says, right? Yeah. And that's common. It's an odd thing when, at least in my personal experience, I felt like I had to kind of go a little bit above and beyond to be like, no, I'm a veteran too. I'm not just this person's spouse or partner or girlfriend or what have you. It's like, no, I'm a veteran too, and I rate these ribbons. Like, these are mine. I earned them. Right. I don't know. I feel a little bit confident saying that that's an unfortunately common experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so your message was 100% on point.
Yeah.
And I was thrilled that it came from you, in that you had the courage to stand up there and say that, hey, this is a real thing. Let's call it what it is, and I'm here to try to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common story that I hear from a lot of veterans, women veterans, younger veterans.
Even your own mom,
my mother, she never self-identified as a veteran, and because of that, she didn't take advantage of her VA benefits.
Oh man.
So that's kind of what it leads to. And I think my whole point was, we can still be part of an organization like the VFW, despite maybe not looking like a typical veteran, and make this organization what we want it to be, and also add to the numbers so that when we advocate on Capitol Hill, we've got this enormous army behind us. And that's why I'm part of the VFW.
Right.
And so I think it spoke to other veterans, and I can't take credit for everything because, again, back to Tim Borland, like
Right.
his excitement, because he closed
Judy King as well.
and Judy King, like, they closed the deal. They sold the VFW on the spot.
Yeah.
And said, "Hey, have you thought about this? Let me tell you why it's important."
Yeah.
And they were amazing.
We had dozens of people at the booth throughout the entire conference, throughout all the hours of the day.
Like all day, every day.
They
So good.
signed up more than 200 new members to the VFW, and also
Yeah.
interacted with probably several hundred more, maybe even more than that. And it was just a really positive, energetic, busy beehive of activity in front of our booth for throughout the conference, and I'm very proud to say that. And overall at SVA, the energy and enthusiasm of the attendees is palpable, and it's encouraging.
Yeah.
Because my first time I ever went to the SVA conference, they call it NatCon, was in Nashville last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was completely blown away by it, and this year was exactly the same. I mean, the energy and enthusiasm is just what I would call encouraging and invigorating, and is really they put on a great conference, and Tim Borland and Judy King really led the way in terms of generating that excitement,
Yeah.
and it was really terrific. It was a great experience.
I tell you what. So, of all the pictures,
We see the photo.
oh yeah, which he posted a ton of photos on Facebook of all the people that he signed, which he normally does, right? Which is great. And they're all different kinds of veterans that you're signing up, because keep in mind, these are veterans that decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to go on to college and take advantage of my GI Bill or what have you,
Right.
and go after being a student again. And, you know, hats off to those people that do, all of you that left service and decided to go back to college, because that's not easy, especially like I heard Nate Bargatze, he had said, like, he went to community college and like they had to do an assessment for him, like, but it was right after high school. You know, that's the way I felt. It's like when I went up to college, like, oh, I have to do.
Some people have family, you know.
It's been so long. But so so there he is, Tim Borland, and who was the other recruiter? You said Judy King.
Yeah.
And they recruiting a bunch of people. And of all people, one of the photos that stood out the most, and I'm going to show this to you, I'll bring it in close, is them recruiting all these American Legion members. So here we go. I got to show this. Let's see if I can get this in the shot.
Everyone wants to be a member of VFW.
One there, if you can see.
Yeah, there you go.
They're all VFW. They're now all VFW members that were and are still, I'm sure, Legion members, and just fantastic. And by the way, they're also wearing those funny caps too. So, you know, it's kind of, I love it because
we can be members of multiple organizations.
We can be members of that and that.
It actually really helps the numbers on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
When we say we've got 1 million members.
You got a voice.
Yeah, it's huge. So join one, join them all, like, if you can.
Yeah. I mean, it's if you can afford it, because you get there is that. It gets a little expensive sometimes, but you know, the truth is, like, not every Legion member can join the VFW, but every VFW member can join the American Legion. And so I think, like you said, the more veterans' voices, the more that we're, you know, helping to surge in these efforts. I mean, they do, to give them props, like, Be the One, that campaign that they have going on right now is great. Yeah, that's, I mean, anything we can do to get that and to help veterans that are in crisis and are facing that. Absolutely. I think that's real important. So, so the other thing about the SVA conference, NatCon, is that you guys had a few discussion panels were going on, right? Different breakout sessions and stuff.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Kristina?
Yeah. So one of them that we had was on the PACT Act.
Okay.
So, you know, a lot of veterans are wondering about PACT Act benefits, expansion of healthcare. So Cindy Noel, who we mentioned, was part of the claims clinic, but also came and spoke on this panel, along with Andrew Petrie from the American Legion. And so we just had a discussion about how do you file for a claim, and what documents do you need to bring, and what is this expansion of healthcare. So it was an informational session. You know, bright and early on a Saturday morning, but we had good attendees, a lot of interested student veterans with a lot of questions. So yeah,
very good. Joe, were you part of any of the discussion panels, or did you attend some of them?
So I was on a panel that was introducing everyone to veterans service organizations. I think the title was "Get to Know Your Veteran Service Organization," I believe. And just kind of what you were touching on before, what I kind of wanted to communicate was the VFW's record in advocacy, and also claims assistance, and also what we do on the local level to strengthen our bonds as veterans.
Yeah.
And so I went into those topics. I talked about Action Corps Weekly. I talked about the Help a Hero Scholarship with our partnership with Sports Clips, and talk about all of the good and excellent scholarship work that we do to support student veterans. But one of the other things I pointed out was that we had Wounded Warrior Project there. We had Disabled American Veterans there, DAV, PVA, American Legion, Blue Star Families, and
AMVETS.
AMVETS, I believe. I think I was missing AMVETS there. And what I communicated to everyone in the room is that we all work hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, because we need to protect veterans' benefits, and then expand those benefits where they're needed. For example, like the latest piece of legislation, the Dole Act.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that clear that we're all, more times than not, we're working shoulder to shoulder, and those alliances are very important.
I just wanted to add too. So at that panel, so I was sitting in the audience. We were there. I was there with our VFW SVA fellows, kind of listening in, and good for them to hear from all the organizations. But when the representative from Blue Star Families, sort of towards the end, said, "I love that we all work together. A lot of these groups worked on the PACT Act. It was for her, I think, before she joined the organization." And she said, "I just want to say," and I just almost lost it because she said, "I just want to say for everyone who worked on the PACT Act," she said, "my husband died of a PACT Act related cancer, and I get survivor benefits, and the PACT Act made getting those benefits so much quicker and easier." And she goes, "This is what it's all about." And I just, when Naomi from DAV looked at me, she goes, "Kristina's going to lose it." And I held it together, but we talked about it afterwards, and I did lose it.
Oh, man.
It's just, these are real people, and we are representatives of our organizations, but we're also affected by these actions as well.
Absolutely. And for those that haven't, just new to the VFW, new to the podcast and whatnot, and maybe the things that we've been talking about over the last few years, Kristina Keenan has really been, the vanguard, if you will, and advocating for the PACT Act. I mean, on the front lines from all the we have talked about this in the last, I think, maybe 2 podcasts being in here in the studio.
It comes often. Yeah.
It's
hard to not talk about.
When you have Kristina and Pat, they're on the steps of the Capitol doing the fire watch, which is you guys were spending overnights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, crazy. And then being there, and people think like, oh, but you got to, rub elbows with Jon Stewart. It was a lot more than just hanging out with Jon Stewart. I mean, there was a lot of work that
that was the fun part.
Sure.
Hanging out with a celebrity who we love and admire. That's the fun part. But the hard part is, every single day for several years, advocating, walking the halls of Congress, knocking on doors, coming back time and time again to have, conversations about why this was important. And that summer when it passed, I mean, it was 100 degrees in DC, and we're outside in the sun with press, with photographers, and it's just hard. It's hard to be on all the time, and to maintain that energy. And it was just a relief when it got done, but it was so much work and an incredible team effort. So
it was an amazing, like, even down to who's going to do water runs.
Oh, yeah.
Keep everybody hydrated out
Who's
there.
going to let some of the advocates into our building to use the restroom?
Yes.
Because they've been outside all night. Yes, we got our badges, and let's walk them over there. And
it was a Herculean effort, and everyone, regardless of which organization they were with, and we even had people here who weren't with any organizations. They were just that passionate about getting it passed
about it and wanted to help,
and they just showed up. We even had a teenager show up.
Yeah.
And, he was here with his family on vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, I'd rather go stand with the veterans."
That's pretty cool.
It was an incredible effort.
It was.
The PACT Act was.
So, I mean, the reason why you got top lobbyists for nonprofits here during your time, and because there was a lot. I mean, even my first venture into this, it was February. So almost, how long have I been here? Since
2021.
21?
Yeah, early
February. We did it. Right.
We did that press conference right outside our VFW.
And you were all in masks and everything like that. And it was like, take a
branded masks.
Yeah.
So if it worked that well.
Yeah, don't get those masks. Just, it was great. At least people knew you had a mask on, I guess.
Being conscientious as a fellow man.
Yes, right.
Did anything. We tried.
It was a VFW screen, really. Just
dual purpose.
It was a branded screen.
All right. Well, that's good. So anything else you want to touch? Any last words you want to say about NatCon? Any plugs you want to give?
NatCon, I mean, it's an incredible experience for anyone that's a student veteran or involved in a veteran group. It is, like Joe said, a very exciting time. Our fellows were impressive. Joe and I got to meet them in person. We got 6 legislative fellows from all around the country. and they're advocating for a piece of legislation, different piece of legislation. And so we met them in person, and they're outstanding. I mean, they're just overachievers by far.
Oh, we're an impressive group. This year's no different.
So it'll be exciting to bring them to Capitol Hill to the DC office in March, and have them advocate in person with their legislators. Now they're on their campuses, advocating, but they'll get a chance to kind of see what we do and do a little bit of themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but would you mind giving a plug for the VFW SVA's fellowship? Because I don't actually
That's what I was thinking.
That we've actually described what that is, and why our relationship with SVA is so important for us.
Ready? 30-second pitch. Go.
No, but I just a bit of an explanation. We've had this very strong relationship with Student Veterans of America for, I think, like you said, 13, 14 years. And we work very closely on education legislation with them. So it was a natural partnership. We have anywhere between 6 and 10 fellows each year. In August is when student veterans can apply for the fellowship.
Yep.
It's an academic year. They conduct the fellowship from wherever they live. They advocate for a piece of legislation, which is important to the VFW, but also to the SBA.
Yeah.
They get to go to NatCon, and then they come to DC to advocate on Capitol Hill,
which we're going to have here in March, coming up.
It'll be here in March.
First full week of March.
Absolutely.
Will be the Washington Conference, our midwinter, if you will, our midwinter national convention, because we do other things. There's other business of the VFW, committee meetings, council of administration all meet there, which is right here in DC. It's actually, we have it over in Crystal City, and then we come across here to come across the river, so to speak, and, kind of people stage here, and then they go across the way to the Senate and all the different Senate buildings. And let me tell you, Brittany and I, we were running around taking photos last year.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a big lift for those who are advocating. It's also a big lift for people who are trying to cover all the advocacy happening.
Man,
it is a massive hundreds of people effort to go to every single office in the House and Senate to advocate for our legislative priorities.
Yes, as many as they can.
As many as they can.
Right.
And so it's really a feat to try to get around and cover as much of that as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
To include, our fellows who are advocating in person.
Our fellows, some of them have relationships with the VFW, that they're members of POS, and some this is their first experience with the VFW. So they're members, and they will get to go visit their legislators with their VFW departments, which is kind of cool. Then they get to know folks at their department level from their state, and continue that relationship going forward.
After having received months of mentorship from our legislative staff specifically, so it's a really amazing immersive experience that they get to have in terms of learning how to advocate, and then getting hands-on experience doing so.
Right.
Yeah, and our Washington conference is also like I said, it is the business, the midwinter, but also I feel like it's advocacy and scholarship focus, because Voice of Democracy, we bring in all the winners from all the different states, the different departments, if you will. That's what the VFW calls our states. We call them departments. And there's 52 in all, to include the Pacific areas and in Europe. And we bring all these. They're high schoolers, and I think they're not middle schoolers, are they, for the Patriots Pen?
Yeah.
I think so.
Patriots Pen.
That's right. Patriots Pen is middle schoolers. And then high schoolers for Voice of Democracy. And they come here for the big competition, and then they name the winner of, I think it was like $32,000.
They get real
college scholarship.
impressive scholarships, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So, our thanks to all the donors, the people that, Prasad from Twisted X, CEO of, he donates a lot. That's a big thing for him. And they have that. We also name our congressional award. We name our congressional award.
Yep.
That we put that out, an award at our reception. It's just so many different things that go on. And then of course, we can't go on without talking about the Commander-in-Chief's testimony, which is the big show.
Yeah.
We get our own day in which or at least our own morning, we don't share that. Let's just say that we don't share that hearing room with anybody else, because the VFW packs that place.
No, standing room only and office.
Standing room only.
Standing.
Lots of standing.
500 people or more in one hearing room. It's packed.
It's pretty packed. And again, talk about tough to cover. We were saying like earlier, you're having to do stretching out and, staying low there in the orchestra pit or whatever. She gets all the good photos.
Have to be nimble.
You have to be nimble. Yeah. Yeah, very good. So those are things that you can expect when we when we have our podcast in March. We're going to talk a little bit about that. In fact, as we talk about upcoming things, we haven't really got to the good of the order yet. Maybe we should now.
Yeah,
but that's probably something that would be for the good of the order is as we go on. So again, going back to what we're saying, inaugurations coming up here in Washington, D.C., fences are going up. Not really sure what that means. Are we going to have a virtual podcast? Don't know. But this one will be fine. And then normally we've been on like this 2-week kind of thing. Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Or every other week. Right. So, we'll have a podcast. And hopefully by then we'll be able to interview our folks, our senior vice, our commander-in-chief, and we'll maybe even have our adjutant general. I don't know. We'll see, because we're going to have a lot of people in town.
We have to take advantage of that time.
Got to.
If they're not here, they're often not here. They're out of Kansas City, so
we're on the road.
They're always traveling.
Yeah.
So,
like for instance,
if we can
right now,
here, that would be ideal.
It would be ideal. And speaking of on the road, I mean, right now, Executive Director Ryan, our Executive Director of the Washington D.C. office, Ryan Gallucci, he and our Director of Operations here, Brad Hazel, is escorting the Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief of the VFW, Carol Whitmore, as they're doing their fact-finding mission over in Brussels with NATO, with military members that are, in some cases forward, but because of what's been going on in the Ukraine, but just those that are stationed in Europe. So
some of my VFW post members are
visiting VFW, right?
Yeah.
They're visiting VFW posts there.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's important for the VFW not only to visit our members that are over there, but visit the future of the VFW,
right.
The servicemen and women that are over there, and really important to understand what their needs are, what their quality of life is like, and then in turn taking those reports and going back to the DoD and saying, hey, did you look at this? Have you looked at this? You need to pay attention more to this. And then also when it comes to legislation, when we come to advocate on behalf of the armed forces, these trips are vital. So they're real busy. They just took off, getting ready to go over there. And so yeah, it's going to be busy.
Perhaps we could bring on Ryan when he gets back, and he could talk about
Love
how the
that.
trip went. And
yeah,
it'll be great. Yeah, I'm excited about it. The trips are always insightful and of tremendous value for VFW and those on the Hill and within DoD. And
the other trips that we do, like for instance, it's always super busy beginning of the year, right? So especially like March timeframe, I go off to Southeast Asia with our junior vice as we go to the Defense POW MIA accounting agency dig sites. They call them JFAs, or Joint Field Activities, in which they're still looking for those that have that are missing from the Vietnam War, from World War II in some cases. So that's what we're going to be doing in March. So more to come on that trip. Maybe we'll, like Brittany, like you and I said, maybe we'll put a couple of these in the can while we're gone, while I'm gone, and that sort of thing. So that way we still have the rhythm going. But for the good of the order, I wanted to get to maybe some of you have noticed, I have upgraded my phone for the good of the order. I know.
Well, I'm so proud of you. I just want to.
Was he using a flip phone last week?
It was pretty close.
This is big news.
I think he was using an iPhone 6. Yes, it was pretty rough.
So I had an iPhone SE.
Oh, okay.
Right, which is basically an iPhone 5 body with 6 guts, I like to say. And so I have leapfrogged into the future with an iPhone 16 Pro Max. Yes, I figured is a high time. As my daughter told me, my daughter and I went, one of my daughters, we went and got new phones together. And she said, Dad, you have been paying full service for that phone.
He couldn't
for
even
all
like
the
download apps and stuff.
It was so bad. Like,
Communicator.
I know. No, so you know what they say. It's like a mechanic's car is never fixed. A carpenter's house is never built. Well, a communicator's phone is never upgraded, I guess.
I thought Rob was carrying a brick, but it was his phone. So I'm happy to see that you've upgraded.
Yes, it was much like that SNL skit with with Will Ferrell. And he does this with his phone.
Oh.
It was almost the same thing. My phone was so small, and now I don't even know what I was doing before. But so that's my good of the order. Not necessarily important, but I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, for communications, it's good.
It's a good thing. Right?
Yes.
It was a good move.
Anybody else going around the room?
I think we did a really great job today of being thorough and covered all bases. And so I feel pretty good about today's. I'm thrilled to have you both here.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to continue bringing on more of the team to highlight everything, all the incredible work that you're all doing every day. And so as we go forward, can expect to see Kristina and Joe and some other new faces, including some of the ones that you've seen already. So it's an exciting time for the VFW podcast.
Yep.
Happy to chat about legislation and other things, all things VFW.
All right. Good.
Thanks for the invite.
Joe?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. This is excellent. I enjoyed the conversation, and I thank you again.
All right. And thanks for the quick plug that you did for Action Corps.
Text VFW
For free.
50457.
Here we go.
You'll be on the inside. You'll be on the inside track.
And maybe what we'll do is put like a QR code under your
Hey, that would be pretty good.
Just a last plug for the Action Corps. During the PACT Act, VFW sent more messages to Congress than any single organization out there. We compared our numbers afterwards. We did a whole after action.
Yeah.
You want to be part of that? Like it's a huge movement. When we got to pass a bill, you click send, and that goes to your member of Congress. It does. It helps. It helps.
We speak with a unified voice.
It helped get the PACT Act done.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks everyone for being here on the show.
Thanks.
And we thank you for watching the VFW podcast. And as a reminder, right here from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And when it comes to the VFW, we are still serving. You take care.
Thank you for listening to Still Serving, the VFW podcast. To get the latest news and information from the Veterans of Foreign Wars, make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to us on social media at VFW HQ, on Facebook at VFW Fans, or visit our website at vfw.org.